Hi, I'm Kenny Klaus, and this is State 48 Homeowner.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the State 48 Homeowner Podcast. And today we're talking about what the experts are predicting for the next couple of years. Guys, what are they predicting?
Oh, Scott, it's all over the place, to be honest with you. I know that we were talking a little bit earlier about the Goldman Sachs came out and they said a 15% chance of a recession in the next 12 months, was it? 12 months in that report? So I went and I'm like, well, let's see if we can get some other...
And that was, they had reduced it from 20.
Sure. They'd reduced it from 20.
Yeah.
But then I went and looked and said, well, what are other people thinking? So the New York Federal Reserve says that there's a 95% chance of a recession in the same 12-month period. The Cleveland Federal Reserve thinks that there's a 75% chance of a recessionary period in the next 12 months. And then the Forbes article that I read right before we recorded this thinks that we're either in a recession or one will start in the fourth quarter of this year leading into the first quarter of 2024. So we're all over the place.
Yeah, two things on that. One, we got to be careful that the word expert gets thrown around a lot right now. But
well, I hear it a lot. Every barbecue you go to, there's plenty 100%. Of experts.
And then following that up from the home pricing standpoint, in 6 of the last 8 recessions, home prices have increased.
No, 100%.
One of them was 2008, which obviously we know why is that. So, I think that's part of that too. Is that's not necessarily a bad thing for housing.
It's never a bad thing for housing. I mean, if we enter it in, and most of them are. The consensus is, Goldman Sachs is coming down because they don't think that there's actually one coming. They're coming from 20 to 15. Now, do they have, a dog in the fight? They're kind of hold a lot of stocks. Yeah. Kind of hoping things don't slow down. But, hey, that's just conjecture on my part. But
well, they also blew the home price appreciation thing for this year. They said beginning of the year it was going to go down 5 to 6%. So.
But when you're looking at it, all of them either think that it's going to be very brief, very short, very shallow. Those same terms get intermingled together when they talk about the potential recession. It's not going to be a deep, long recessionary period, not a great recession like we experienced after the housing crisis in 2009. Nothing of that nature, but when we are in a recessionary period, housing remains resilient, just as it has in a high interest rate environment for the last year. Yep. But then when we do hit a recessionary period, the Fed then starts cutting the Federal Reserve rate, which then inflation starts to come down. Consumer activity starts to pick up. Long-term fixed interest rates, like long-term mortgages, start to fall even more rapidly in that period. So a recessionary period is usually very good for housing.
And that's good because taking into account mortgage rates, incomes, and home prices, August of 2023 stands out to be the least affordable month in U.S. housing this year, this century, which sounds really bad. It was 23 years. So,
when
I first heard that, I'm like, oh my God. Then I was like, I thought they meant 100 years.
In a century, this century.
So, I think that.
Heck, this millennium.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go. And I think following up too on that, speaking of experts, the Pulseomics is basically every quarter they survey the distinguished panel of over 100 economists, investment strategists, housing market analysts. Regarding the 5-year expectation for future home prices, it was 3.32%. This is nationally this year, 2.17 next year, 3.24 in 2025, and actually higher the next 2 years. I just didn't put all that in here, but so again, going back to the biggest fear I think for people that are homeowners or looking to become homeowners is what's going to happen with home prices. Right. There's not a lot of expectation that it's going to do anything except appreciate. And it goes back to lack of housing and lack of inventory available. So we have seen a little locally increase. We're up, active listing count was up 3% week over week. We're currently around 12,500. Now, perspective, we were in about 21,000 in October of last year and got down to just over 11,000 in June, July of this year. So it's slowly creeping back up, but 20 to 25,000 would be considered balance in a normal demand environment. So, demand has cooled significantly, obviously, because of that, but rates are also keeping homeowners off the market because 71% of current homeowners have a rate 4% or lower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what's making the affordability thing such a challenge for people. We're not seeing a lot of the sell here, buy another home here right now type clients. It's a lot of
We're
it's.
saying we're either coming into this market or we're going into another market.
Yep.
Right. Well, and again, when we look forward, as we talk about, even through all of these reports, all of them say look for housing to remain resilient. There's a lack of inventory. Demand still remains high. I mean, people are still buying homes in a 7.5% interest rate environment. They're just now looking ahead saying, okay, well, in 10, 12, 18 months, I can potentially refinance.
Yep.
If this is the worst my payment's ever going to be, I can refinance down the road and lower my payment, but now I have the home because home prices do continue, at least from our forecast, to continue to appreciate. And when you don't have inventory and you have demand for housing, imagine that demand when rates do drop, as we always talk about. So,
And we used to go back to, even if there would be a little bit of negative equity within a year or two of that, the reality is housing is a long-term investment, and nobody should be trying to buy a house if they plan to sell it in the next 12 months.
No, that's an excellent point, because most headlines out there are very short-minded.
Correct.
It's just what's going to happen in the next quarter, what's going to happen in the next year. But home ownership is a long-term wealth strategy.
Well, and think about all the people that strategically defaulted in 07, 08, 09. Looking back now, if they could have still afford that, don't they wish they would have kept those? And where the values would be now. I mean, we were just looking at the average price in 85212 in 2019 versus today. I mean,
69% increase.
Yeah, 69% increase. So, I mean, that's just in the last 4 years. I mean, imagine going back to 08. I mean,
now that doesn't happen
no,
too often in
no,
history.
But the reality is, even if you took out the COVID years and that rapid, I mean, you're still up considerably. And so I think that's where there's a lot of fear in the market and a lot of fear in our industry of people saying, oh, this isn't a good time to buy and all of this and that. And I think you have to really step back and look at the whole picture, and realize, are you going to be in this house for the next 5 to 7 years, which is the average length of time that forever equals in Maricopa County. When we say it's our forever home, and that's the average. So I think that's just something that, is in our industry, we've got to do a better job of kind of coaching and explaining the idea of that, the longer you wait, the more competition you're going to be fighting with in the buyer market, because once rates come down, demand's going to skyrocket.
Right.
And then they're going to be out there with everybody else competing over a smaller number of homes available.
This video is brought to you by Klaus Team Real Estate Solutions. The Klaus Team is different. With the Klaus Team, you have someone on your side. Where you live and make memories is important. We have more unique strategies than anyone else to help you accomplish what matters most to you. We can help you with traditional real estate as well as other options such as our lease purchase programs. We can help you buy first then sell, and we can bring you instant offers. We're here to help our neighbors achieve the American dream and help them build wealth through home ownership. For more info or to start your home search, visit us online at klausteam.com.
And it's kind of, that outlook that we continue to talk about. I mean, 2024, we've got the fourth quarter coming up of this year. I mean, now we're heading into that holiday season. I mean, what does housing traffic usually look like this time of year?
Yeah, I mean, locally, it doesn't slow down tremendously until probably the 2 weeks or so before, maybe the early December, and then really through the end of January is kind of our slower time of the year. Obviously, we're not weather dependent like other places where you can't get out of your driveway to go show a house.
It's a little bit nicer to go look at open houses in late November here, right?
And so, I mean, I always say in a normal market, go back to pre-COVID. I mean, August and then December, January were probably the 3 slower months in our industry. And, but again, in Arizona, I mean, we had a good December last year, and that was kind of surprising things,
And we have outliers. It seems that for, when we talk about buyer activity, it has been pretty level for the past year. So demand really hasn't, it's creeped up, creeped down, but it's stayed pretty much the same. We've had, not much difference in transaction count.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely, we're definitely going to be less closings. I mean, there was about 6,500 in August. It's down 12% from a year ago, but it was up 8% from July. My expectation right now, it looks like September would probably be less than that. But, again, it's going to be that long-term again, reason for it.
Awesome. What else? I mean, you guys want to talk about what we're kind of looking at in 2024 and 2025?
I think that, again, if you follow the demand rating on a scale, it has come down as rates have gone up. It's not because people don't want to buy or people are afraid of home ownership or anything like that. So again, going back to, if by chance we had low 6s, high 5s, even by fourth quarter or first quarter of next year, demand's going to come roaring back, and that's going to be against a backdrop of less inventory.
Let's talk about that. I mean, we look at those surveys, they just came out about a couple weeks ago for the forecast for 30-year fixed rates heading into the fourth quarter of this year. You're talking Fannie Mae puts one out, Freddie Mac puts one out, the Mortgage Bankers Association puts one out, NAR puts one out, that most of them expect even fourth quarter this year, 2023, for interest rates to be in that mid to high 6s. Now, and that's consensus when you average out 4 or 5 different, BlackRock I think is one of them as well, so we'll throw an equity investor in there as well. But in 2024, they're talking interest rates in the low 6s, high 5s, heading towards the second half of the year. And then in 2025, interest rates being in that 4% range. And again, that's just an average amongst those 4 or 5 that project.
Well, and keep in mind, too, that going into 2022, we were thinking all of was they'd be in the high 4s, low 5s by the fourth quarter. That happened by March.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of variables into that. And like you said, I think the idea of when the Fed decides and they either start cutting, or if they flat out say we're done for the year, I think you're going to start to see ease on that at that point.
Yeah, and we've got that coming up in
next week.
In next week, and 10 days from our recording right now, you have the next Fed meeting. They'll have a rate decision, and then they'll have 3 more before the end of the year to see where things are at. And the inflationary trend continues to go lower. I mean, we're now in the 3s from where we were in the 9s, this time last year, 8 and 9% inflationary rate, to where at least it's come down to where we're like 3.5, 3.6, 3.8, depending which report you look at. And then looking at Kiplinger's, who puts an economic forecast together, and they kind of do a consensus letter every week, but their forecast is that in 2024 that the inflationary rate will average 2.7%, which is close to that 2% range that the Fed wants to see. Now, what happens during that time that you said, we've got an election year coming up, which spooks a lot of people in and out. You've also got, global effects. You now have, Russia and Saudi with oil and controlling the input and output of oil, which can be inflationary, which causes, peaks and valleys in it. But when you look at it as an average, 2.7% would lead you to believe that, yes, interest rates will move lower as we head later in the year, as that average holds consistent in the
And they're 3%. Still holding to that 2%, because there's a lot of economists and experts going, they should just stop at 3, settle with 3%, be happy with it, and that. But they're still...
It's their magic number.
Yeah.
It really is. I don't know why, but it's their magic number.
And let's think about it. If rates do go down,
sure,
and we start to see that gap shrink between what people's current rate is and what the market rate is, and they go, okay, it's not so painful now. We can get the house that we want and live local. The thing that's holding us back on inventory is we're seeing, like you said, Craig, it's people moving in, moving out. Now, if we all of a sudden start to see more people moving within the market, I'm not sure that doesn't really change the market balance at that point, because now we have more people moving, we have more buyers, more sellers, but not drastically in one direction or the other. We've been seeing a lot of first-time home buyers.
Yep.
Yes.
What we haven't been seeing so much is people that are selling locally and buying locally. And so if rates change, I think that's the area for opportunity.
Demand will come back first, right? Because there's more buyers that either have a home or don't have a home, meaning than there would be sellers, right? Like there are people that aren't homeowners that will still be buying, looking, and there are people that are current homeowners that will need to sell and buy. So I think the buying side of it's going to come back first. And I think once that happens, you're going to see inventory starts to drop again a little until sellers get the memo and go, oh, wait a minute, I can go from 3% to 5% or 5.5%.
Sure.
because A, we need more space, or we don't need all this space, or we have to move closer to work, whatever that is,
Right.
or people getting pushed back into
Or
the office.
I hate my neighbors, but I put up with them because of my rate.
Well, and on the I mean, regardless of interest rate, those same homeowners, because of what we just talked about from 2019 to 2023,
Yes.
just in the 212, zip code, is that tremendous amount of equity that they have, so that equity can be utilized.
Yep.
Like, hey, maybe they are downsizing to go into their retirement home, their forever home in
Right.
retirement anyways, or become snowbirds, or you've got those people that make that move, but they can use that equity to either lower their overall principal mortgage amount, or even buy down the interest rate to like, okay, well, I can buy my rate down into the 4s or maybe even into the 3s, depending on how low they go, because
And
the
that's-
average is 7, so that means somebody's staying for 20 years and somebody's selling in 2, right?
And you're going to see investors come back, second home, because right now, if you're financing as an investor or second home, you're paying even higher than the normal or what the first or the owner owns.
Yeah, and that's something that we on the mortgage banker side kind of hope those things were put in place during COVID, during that COVID period where those loan level pricing adjustments for second homes were added on to make second homes less attractive and more in line with investment property purchases, meaning that the loan level pricing adjustment just made, instead of getting a similar interest rate to buying a primary home, just putting more down payment on a second property, you now were paying an exorbitantly higher interest rate. You went from maybe a 7% to an 8.25%.
Right.
Very in line with an investment property. So hopefully that tapers back and they take the risk out of it by just keeping the down payment, needing 10, 15, 20% down.
Well, because
for
we're a
second
second home state. I mean, that's very popular for people. So that's another group of buyers that right now just aren't typically out right now because of the rate. And
that's
so I think you'll see that. Like I said, you'll see the people that want to do with 1 or 2 off investment properties that, rates right now make it to where there's not enough spread between your payment and rent. But rates come down, you get that opportunity. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's it. We know that. It's just a matter of when. And,
right.
and just kind of, providing the information we can, but really just encouraging people to look at their long-term goals and the long-term benefits of home ownership and, go from there.
Awesome.
Well, thank you guys. If you have any questions about real estate or mortgage and want to dive in deeper with any of these guys, just reach out to us at 480-354-7344 or at klausteam.com. Thanks for spending time with us this week at State 48 Homeowner, the ins and outs of owning an Arizona home. You can connect with us for more information, submit topics you'd like us to discuss further, and you can see relevant videos, give us feedback, answer your real estate questions, and more at state48homeowner.com.